All right, we are wrapping up Unit 7, last part of this packet, by solving radical equations. So you can undo a radical equation by raising each side to the nth power. So whatever the index is for your radical, you can undo it essentially by taking that power on both sides. So these are your steps. You're going to isolate the radical on one side, apply the property of raising each side to the nth power, solve, and then you need to check into your original equation for extraneous solutions because I can't take square root of negative numbers. So let's jump in. We only have 8 examples to work through. Starting on 1, I need to get my radical by itself. So the first thing I would do is subtract 13. So what I get when I do that is that the square root of x is equal to negative 13, which is not going to give me any real solutions because I don't get negative answers with square roots. So this one will already be no solution. Okay. Moving on to 2, my radical is already by itself, so I'm going to jump to step 2, which is applying both sides to the nth power. My index here for cube root is 3, so I'm going to raise both sides to the 3rd power. My radical now goes away on the left, and x minus 4 is going to be equal to 4 to the 3rd power, which is 64. I can now add 4 to both sides, and I get that x is 68. On to number 3. My radical already by itself, so I don't need to move anything, but now I'm going to square both sides. Now what that's going to do on the right is cause me to square a binomial, which means I have to FOIL. So on the left, I'm going to get 2x, and on the right, I'm going to get x squared minus 8x plus 16, which means I need to solve this by factoring. So I'm going to subtract the 2, x, then I can factor. This is going to be x minus 8 times x minus 2. So my two solutions are 8 and 2. Now if I plug 8 back into the original equation, everything checks out fine. But if I plug 2 into that original equation, what I'm going to get is that the square root of 4 is equal to negative 2, which does not work. So 2 is an extraneous solution, and you would just use 8. Moving on to 4, I've got a radical on both sides, so I'm still going to square both sides, but what I'm going to have to be careful on the right side is that I have to square both parts. So on the left, I'm going to get 3y minus 5, and on the right, I'm going to get 9y. So again, moving my like terms, negative 5 is going to be equal to 6y, therefore y is negative 5 over 6. Now if I plug that in, I'm going to end up with a negative inside both of these radicals, which cannot happen. So that solution doesn't work, and it was my only solution, so this one is also going to be no solution. Okay, we're halfway through. On to number 5. My radical is not by itself. I need to subtract that 3 first before I can do anything else. So the square root of 8x plus 80 is going to be equal to 8. So I can now square both sides. Then I can subtract 80. 64 minus 80 is negative 16. Plugging all that in, x is equal to negative 2. Now, you might think, oh, that's a negative value, it's not going to work. But if you plug it in here, x times negative 2 is negative 16. Negative 16 plus 80 will still give you a positive number inside of your square root. So that one will work. Okay, on 6, my radical is not by itself, so I need to move over the x and the 6. So the square root of x is going to be equal to negative x plus 6. So when I'm squaring both of those sides again, I'm going to need to FOIL over here. And that's going to give me x squared minus 12x plus 36. This is going to be solved by factoring. So I'm going to subtract that x. When I factor this, I'm going to have negative 9 and negative 4, which means my two solutions are 9 and 4, both of which work. Neither of those makes a negative inside my square root. Okay, on 7, my radical is by itself, so I need to square both sides. Again, I'm going to have to FOIL on the right. That'll give me x squared plus 14x plus 49. So I'm going to factor, subtracting 10x and 61 this time. So x squared plus 4x minus 12. That's going to be x plus 6 and x minus 2. So my two solutions are negative 6 and positive 2. Again, checking both of these, the negative 6, this would become negative 60 plus 61. That still gives me a positive inside my square root, so both of those solutions do work. All right, 8. What do I do here? Well, this really means cube root, right? This is cube root of 2x plus 15 minus the cube root of x. So if I just move that one to the opposite side, I can cube both of those to get 2x plus 15 is equivalent to x. And I can just rearrange this to solve. X is going to be negative 15. And this is a cube root, so I can have a negative on the inside. So that one does indeed work. And that wraps up your solving radical equations notes and our Unit 7 packet.